This two-story colonial in a Connecticut suburb was home for Faisal Shazad, by all appearances a family man with a wife and two daughters ages 1 and 4.
Just a quiet family, obviously from the Middle East or something, and just pretty much themselves.
Neighbors remember seeing Shazad leaving for work around 6:30 a.m. and returning around 3:30, always dressed in a suit, while his wife, an American citizen with an accounting degree from the University of Colorado, stayed home with the kids. Nothing suspicious, say neighbors, who thought they were just an ordinary family. Shazad had worked as a junior-level financial analyst at this Connecticut firm, but left in the middle of last year. The company says it was his decision. Shazad first came to the U.S. on a student visa in 1998, earned a BA majoring in computer information systems at the University of Bridgeport in 2000, then an MBA 5 years later. Shazad then got a work visa, which allowed him to stay in the U.S. Records indicate he married in 2008 and became a citizen in April of 2009.
He's in his early 30s. He's 30 years old. He has a wife. He has 2 kids. This is a family man.
An American citizen who may have been a good candidate for terror.
I think this may be an aspect that terrorist groups abroad are trying to identify Americans that they can bring in. Not just people to travel from outside to enter the United States, but people who live here.
Perhaps people like Faisal Shazad, who lived here in the suburbs with his family. Ron Allen, NBC News, Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Faisal Shazad had already pleaded guilty in the Times Square bomb plot, and his life sentence was mandatory. But he remained defiant today in court. In his statement, the 31-year-old Pakistani-American said, "Brace yourselves because the war with Muslims has just begun." Shazad's failed plot unfolded last May when street vendors alerted police to a smoking SUV, a Nissan Pathfinder, on a bustling Saturday night. The bomb squad defused the car bomb, and police said it was packed with fuel and fireworks.
On the back seat of the vehicle were 2 full 5-gallon red plastic gasoline containers. Between them was a 16-ounce can filled with between 20 and 30 M88 devices.
Today in court, prosecutors showed video of an FBI test showing what the bomb could have done. Investigators said Shazad watched live webcams like this one to pick a site where he could kill as many people as possible. In a statement today, the head of the FBI's New York office said Shazad built a mobile weapon of mass destruction and hoped and intended that it would kill large numbers of innocent people and planned to do it again 2 weeks later. In the event, the would-be bomber was arrested 2 days after his first attempt as he tried to board a flight to Dubai at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. He has since admitted the Pakistani Taliban trained and financed him, and this internet video showed him meeting with the head of that group last year. Elsa Chang of public radio station WNYC covered today's sentencing. Elsa Chang, welcome.
Thank you.
What was Shazad's tone and demeanor as he made his statement today in the courtroom?
Well, just as you noted in the report, he was extremely defiant from the beginning to the end. It was almost like a replay of his guilty plea hearing in June, where from the very get-go, he not only wanted to launch into a speech, but not only wanted to say that he was proud of what he did, but wanted other Muslims to follow his example and also commit violence against Americans.
Did he have a written speech, or did he just stand up and talk?
He did stand up and talk. It sounded like he was reading from a prepared remarks. He said that we are only Muslims, but if you call us terrorists, we are proud terrorists, and we will keep on terrorizing you. He said at another point that the defeat of the U.S. is imminent. Again, at another point, he said the U.S. and NATO forces who have occupied Muslim lands, we do not accept your democracy or your freedom because we already have Sharia law. That was the tenor of the entire proceeding. And at multiple points during his speech, Judge Miriam Goldman-Cedarbaum tried to interject and interrupt him to try to draw out a colloquy, a conversation between the two of them. And at one point, she cut him off and said, When you were made a naturalized citizen last year, weren't you supposed to swear your allegiance to this country? Shazad replied, I did swear, but I did not mean it. And the judge only replied, so you took a false oath. And that was basically the mood of the entire half-hour sentencing hearing today.
The whole thing, you say, lasted 30 minutes from beginning to end?
About.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
What did the judge have to say? Did the judge direct any comments to him about his crime and what he had done and why he's going to prison, etc.?
She certainly did. She said that obviously this is a defendant who has not even a tone of a hint of remorse. He's someone who would obviously want to repeat his crime if given the chance. And in this particular case, it was very important to her that she imposed the harshest sentence possible in order to deter others who may want to follow in his footsteps. And in saying these things, she echoed what prosecutors had said in their pre-sentencing memorandum, which they submitted to the court last week. They said that Shazad is somebody who basically needs to be made an example of. There's a rise in homegrown terrorism across the country, and people like Shazad, naturalized U.S. citizens or even American-born citizens who have U.S. passports and can travel freely throughout the country and the world, who speak fluent English, these are people that are particularly prized assets for foreign terror organizations. So it's particularly in this high-profile case with a man like Shazad, who came here from Pakistan and created a life here in the U.S., but became radicalized and basically adopted a life's purpose to pursue a terrorist agenda. It's people like him who really need to be made an example of now in order to deter others who may want to follow suit.
Was there a lawyer who represented him in any way, who spoke for him or said anything on his behalf?
Today, his lawyers, the federal defenders, Philip Weinstein, did not make any remarks on his behalf. He kind of ceded the floor to Shazad, who clearly wanted to speak for several minutes. He told the judge right at the get-go, I'm going to take about 5 to 10 minutes. The judge didn't let him get through all of his statement. It was almost a tug of war. She would interrupt him and remind him, I'm only interested in the comments you have that relate specifically to what sentence you think you deserve. And Shazad would kind of bring her back to the speech that he had prepared and just re-announce his hatred of American, of U.S. policies, and his desire to see all Muslims rise up and attack the U.S. Until they stop invading Muslim lands.
But he didn't speak directly to the idea that he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life.
He did at the end. The judge asked him, well, when the judge first announced, I impose a life sentence on you, the first words out of Shazad's mouth was, Allahu Akbar, which is, in Arabic, God is great. It was the first words that escaped from his lips. And then when he was asked at the end, do you have any final words to say, Shazad only replied, I'm very happy with the deal God has given me. There was no sense of regret in his voice. He seemed like someone who was proud to announce what he had done and is perfectly willing to spend the rest of his life in prison because of that.
And for the record, this is a real life sentence, right? There is no way that he could ever be paroled for good behavior or anything like that?
That's right. In fact, Judge Cedarbaum didn't even want to discuss any provisions for supervised release because in her mind, this man is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. One of the counts against him, count 6, which was for use of a destructive device in a crime of violence, actually carries a mandatory life sentence. So he will be spending the rest of his life in prison without possibility of parole.
There were about how many people in the courtroom altogether, including reporters, spectators, whatever?
All the rows of seats were filled. I'd say maybe close to 100. There weren't a tremendous amount of spectators just from the general public. Most of the courtroom was filled with journalists and what looked to be staff from the U.S. Attorney's Office and Federal Defender's Office and court staff. I didn't see any supporters of Shazad in the crowd, that's for sure.
Generally speaking, a tone of a quiet tone, or was it scary or noisy, or what was it like?
He's a very soft-spoken man, actually. You really had to strain to hear him because he was speaking up, so he wasn't mic'd directly. And although his tone was soft-spoken, his words were, extremely aggressive. Right at the get-go, he says, "How can I be judged by a court that does not understand the suffering of my people? If I'm given 1,000 lives, I will sacrifice them all for the life of Allah." But he says it quietly, and, at times, at least in the beginning, he had to confer with his attorney for a bit, but other than that, he just kept on going with his prepared remarks.
Okay. Elsa Chang, thank you very much.
You're welcome.